The woman bleeding in the dirt outside the Rusty Bell Saloon had been called every filthy name imaginable by the time Quentin Ward dismounted his horse. But nobody in Alamosa, Colorado, had bothered to ask what her mother christened her. The year was 1878, and the high desert town nestled in the San Luis Valley had seen its share of rough characters. But Victoria Garrett had arrived 3 months prior under circumstances that set tongues wagging from the start. She had stepped off the stagecoach with bruises fading on her arms and a carpetbag that looked like it had been through hell, and within hours the speculation began. By sundown that first day, the shopkeeper's wife had declared her a woman of loose morals. By the next morning, the banker's son called her something far worse when she refused his advances. The name stuck like burrs on wool, and soon enough, Victoria stopped correcting anyone. She had taken work at the Rusty Bell doing whatever Marjorie, the owner, needed. Washing glasses, scrubbing floors, serving drinks. The work was honest, but the patrons were not, and their assumptions about any woman working in a saloon turned their words into weapons. Still, Victoria kept her chin up and her mouth shut, saving every penny she earned in a tin hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the tiny room she rented above the seamstress shop. That particular September afternoon, she had been carrying a crate of bottles from the supply wagon when Horace Garrett stumbled into town. He was drunk before noon, which was not unusual for Alamosa, but the way he looked at Victoria made several men on the boardwalk take notice. He was her husband, though calling him that gave the word a dignity it did not deserve. Victoria had left him in Kansas City after 2 years of bruises and broken promises, but somehow he had found her. Horace grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks and called her the worst thing anyone had yet to call her, loud enough for half the town to hear. When she tried to pull away, he hit her across the face. When she stumbled, he kicked her. When she fell into the dirt, bleeding from her mouth and nose, he spat on her and walked into the saloon demanding whiskey. That was when Quentin Ward rode into Alamosa for the first time. He was a tall man in his late 20s with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He had been trailing cattle from Wyoming to New Mexico with a small crew, and Alamosa was meant to be a brief stop for supplies before continuing south. He had no intention of getting involved in anyone's troubles. A cowboy learned early to mind his own business in strange towns. But something about the sight of that woman in the dirt, bleeding and alone while people walked past like she was nothing more than an inconvenience, made him pull his horse to a stop. Maybe it was the way she was trying not to cry, her jaw set despite the blood on her lips. Maybe it was the fact that nobody else seemed inclined to help. Or maybe it was something deeper, something he would not understand until much later. Quentin dismounted and walked over to her, his boots crunching in the dry earth. He crouched down beside her, careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. Up close, he could see that she had dark hair coming loose from its pins and brown eyes that held more defiance than fear. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice carrying a gentle Texas drawl that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "You are hurt. Let me help you up." Victoria looked at him with suspicion born of experience. Men who offered help usually wanted something in return. But there was something different in his eyes, something that made her take the hand he offered. His grip was strong but careful as he helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Thank you," she managed, her voice rough. She tried to pull away to maintain whatever dignity she had left, but the world tilted dangerously. "Easy," Quentin said. "You need to sit down. Is there somewhere I can take you? Someone I should fetch?" Victoria shook her head, then winced at the motion. "No one. I have a room above the seamstress shop, but I can manage." "With respect, madam, you look like you might fall over before you get there." He glanced toward the saloon. "Was that man who went in there the one who hurt you?" She followed his gaze and something flickered across her face. Fear, yes, but also a bone-deep weariness. "My husband." Quentin's jaw tightened. He had opinions about men who struck women, opinions that had gotten him into more than one fight over the years. "I see." "It does not matter," Victoria said, and there was such resignation in her voice that it made something in Quentin's chest ache. "The town already knows what I am, or what they think I am. They have called me everything but my name, so why would they care if Horace knocks me around?" "What is your name?" Quentin asked. Victoria blinked at him, surprised by the question. It had been so long since anyone had asked. "Victoria," she said finally. "Victoria Garrett." "Victoria," Quentin repeated, and the way he said it, soft and respectful, made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She had not cried through all the names, all the insults, all the casual cruelty of the past 3 months. But this simple kindness from a stranger threatened to break something loose inside her. "I need to get back to work," she said quickly, trying to regain her composure. "Marjorie will dock my pay if I am late." "The hell you will," Quentin said, then caught himself. "Pardon my language." "But you are injured. You need to rest." "I need to eat," Victoria said bluntly, "and resting does not pay rent." Quentin studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. "Come on. Let me at least buy you a meal at the restaurant down the street and we can get you cleaned up some. Then if you are determined to go back to work, at least you will have eaten." Victoria wanted to refuse. She had learned not to accept charity, not to let anyone feel like they had leverage over her. But she was hungry and tired, and the genuine concern in the stranger's face was more than she had experienced in months. "Why would you do that?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Quentin said simply. "And because my mama raised me better than to walk past someone who needs help." He offered his arm. "My name is Quentin Ward. I am just passing through, but I would be honored if you would let me help Victoria." Hearing her name again, spoken with such gentleness, made the tears she had been fighting finally spill over. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed, but Quentin pretended not to notice. He just stood there patiently, his arm still offered until she finally took it. They walked slowly toward the restaurant, and Victoria was acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. Mrs. Henderson from the general store actually stopped sweeping her porch to gawk. 2 cowboys outside the feed store elbowed each other and made comments she could not quite hear but could easily imagine. By tomorrow, the whole town would have added seducing strangers to her list of sins. But Quentin seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps he simply did not care. He guided her into the small restaurant with its red checked tablecloths and smell of fried chicken, and he pulled out a chair for her like she was a lady instead of what the town thought she was. The restaurant owner, a stout woman named Edith, came over with poorly concealed curiosity on her face. "What can I get you folks?" "2 plates of whatever you have hot," Quentin said. "And coffee, please." "Water for me," Victoria said quietly. Coffee cost more, and she would not make this stranger spend more than necessary. "Coffee for the lady," Quentin repeated firmly, then added with a smile that transformed his serious face, "She has had a hard morning." Edith's eyes took in Victoria's split lip and the blood on her collar, and for just a moment, something like sympathy crossed her features. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "I will bring it right out." When they were alone, Victoria folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "You should not be seen with me. It will ruin your reputation." "I do not have a reputation here," Quentin pointed out, "and even if I did, I reckon I would survive. They will think I am what they already think I am." "And what is that?" Victoria met his eyes. "A whore, A drunk. A thief. A troublemaker. Take your pick. The town has called me all of it. Quentin's expression hardened. Have you stolen anything? No. Are you drunk? I have not had a drop of alcohol since I arrived. Then seems to me the town is full of liars, Quentin said. And I do not much care what liars think. Despite everything, Victoria felt a small smile tug at her lips. It hurt because of the cut, but it was worth it. You are either very brave or very foolish, Quentin Ward. My brothers would say foolish, he admitted. But I prefer to think of it as principled. Edith returned with coffee and 2 heaping plates of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The smell made Victoria's stomach clench with hunger. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a real meal. Most days she survived on stale bread and whatever scraps Marjorie let her take from the saloon kitchen. Thank you, she said, and meant it deeply. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Victoria tried to pace herself, to eat like a lady rather than wolf down the food, but it was difficult. Quentin noticed, but said nothing, just passed her the basket of biscuits when she finished her first helping. So, he said eventually, if you do not mind me asking, what brings a woman like you to Alamosa? A woman like me. Someone who is clearly educated and well-mannered despite what the gossips might say. Victoria took a sip of coffee, considering how much to tell him. But there was something about Quentin that invited honesty. Maybe it was the way he had used her name, or the way he looked at her like she was a person rather than a problem. I was running away from my husband. I thought Colorado was far enough that he would not find me. But he did. He did. She touched her sore jaw gingerly. Horace has a talent for tracking down things he thinks belong to him. You are not a thing, Quentin said quietly. You are a person, and no one has the right to hurt you, husband or not. Try telling that to the law. I know the law says a man can do what he wants with his wife, Quentin acknowledged. But that does not make it right. Victoria studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. You are an unusual man, Quentin Ward. My mama was an unusual woman. She believed women should have rights same as men. My pa thought she was crazy, but he loved her enough to let her speak her mind. She taught all us boys that a real man protects those weaker than himself, not preys on them. Your mother sounds like someone I would like to have known. She passed when I was 17, Quentin said, and even after more than a decade the grief was evident in his voice. Fever took her one winter, but I try to live by what she taught me. They talked as they finished their meal, and Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. Quentin told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about following cattle drives north because it paid better than ranch work. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh despite her injuries. In turn, she told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, the daughter of a schoolteacher who had taught her to read and write and think for herself. She told him about marrying Horace at 19, thinking he was charming and ambitious, only to discover too late that his charm was a mask, and his ambition meant drinking away any money they had. She told him about the first time he hit her and how she had made excuses for him. About the second time and the third, until making excuses became harder than just accepting it. I left him 6 months ago, she said. Took a stagecoach west and kept going until my money ran out. Alamosa seemed as good a place as any to start over. Except the town decided who you were before you got a chance to show them. People see what they want to see, Victoria said with a shrug. A woman alone, working in a saloon, no husband in sight. It is easier for them to think the worst than to imagine there might be a real story behind it. Quentin pushed his empty plate aside and leaned forward. Victoria, what are you going to do about your husband? The question hung heavy between them. Victoria had been avoiding thinking about it, but she could not forever. I do not know. Hope he drinks himself unconscious and moves on, I suppose. And if he does not, then I will deal with it. She met his eyes. I have dealt with worse. You should not have to. But I do, Victoria said simply. That is the reality of my situation. Quentin was quiet for a moment, then said, I am supposed to head south tomorrow to catch up with my crew. But I could stay a few days. Make sure he does not hurt you again. Victoria's heart did something complicated in her chest. You do not even know me. I know enough, Quentin said. I know you deserve better than what this town has given you. And I know I would not sleep right if I rode out of here and left you to face that man alone. Quentin. She wanted to accept, desperately, but she also knew what it would mean. If you stay, people will talk. They will assume things. Let them assume. I have been called worse things than whatever they come up with. You say that now, but you have not lived in a small town where reputation is everything. Victoria. He reached across the table and took her hand, and the touch was so unexpected and warm that she nearly pulled away. I am staying, at least for a few days. You can argue with me, but it will not change my mind. Looking into his determined face, Victoria realized she believed him. This stranger, this cowboy who had no reason to care about her troubles, was going to stay because it was the right thing to do. The tears threatened again, and this time she let them fall. Thank you, she whispered. Quentin squeezed her hand gently. No thanks necessary. Now, let me pay for this meal and then I will walk you back to your room so you can rest. I need to tell Marjorie I cannot work tonight. I will tell her, Quentin said firmly. You are in no condition to be serving drinks to men who will just see your injuries as an invitation to say worse things. Victoria wanted to argue, but she was too tired and too sore. She let Quentin pay Edith, ignoring the woman's speculative looks, and then let him escort her back through town to the seamstress shop. The walk felt longer this time, probably because her adrenaline was fading and the reality of her injuries was setting in. Mrs. Chen, the seamstress, looked up from her work when they entered. She was a Chinese immigrant who had come to Colorado during the mining boom and stayed after her husband died in a cave-in. She rented Victoria the room upstairs because she needed the money, not out of any particular kindness, but she had never been cruel like some of the others. Your rent is due in 3 days, Mrs. Chen said without preamble. I know, Victoria said. I will have it, Mrs. Chen's eyes flicked to Quentin, then back to Victoria. No men in the rooms. Those are the rules. I am just making sure she gets upstairs safely, Quentin said politely. Then I will be on my way. The stairs were narrow and steep, and Victoria's legs felt like they might give out halfway up. Quentin stayed close behind her, ready to catch her if she fell. Her room was small and sparse, furnished with just a narrow bed, a washstand, and a wooden crate that served as a table. But it was clean and it was hers, and that was more than she had in Kansas City. Thank you again, Victoria said from the doorway. For everything. Lock your door, Quentin instructed. And if your husband comes around, you scream. Mrs. Chen will hear you and I will be close by. Where will you be staying? I saw a boarding house down the street. I will get a room there. He tipped his hat to her. Rest now, Victoria. I will check on you tomorrow. After he left, Victoria closed and locked the door, then sank onto her bed. Her body ached and her face throbbed, but for the first time in 3 months, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Outside, Quentin walked back toward the main street, his mind working. He needed to find out more about Horace Garrett and what the man's intentions were. He also needed to send word to his crew that he would be delayed. But first, he wanted to have a word with the owner of the Rusty Bell Saloon. Marjorie was a hard woman in her 50s who had seen everything the West had to offer, and been impressed by none of it. She was wiping down the bar when Quentin walked in, and her eyes assessed him with the practiced gaze of someone who could spot trouble at 50 paces. "If you are looking for a drink, we have got whiskey, and whiskey," she said. "Actually, I am here about Victoria Garrett." Marjorie's expression did not change. "What about her? She is hurt and needs to rest. She will not be in to work tonight." "I saw what happened outside," Marjorie said, still wiping the bar. "Her husband is a piece of work. You know who he is." "I know enough. He has been in here all afternoon drinking and telling anyone who will listen that his runaway wife owes him. Says she stole from him and he aims to get restitution." Marjorie finally looked up. "Who are you? A friend?" "She does not have friends in this town." "She does now." Marjorie studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The girl works hard and keeps her head down. I do not care what people say about her, but if she does not show up, I do not pay her. Those are the rules." "Fair enough," Quentin said. "I will make sure she has what she needs for a few days. You going to make trouble?" "I am going to prevent it." Marjorie almost smiled. "Good luck with that, Cowboy. Trouble has a way of finding you in places like this." Quentin turned to go, then paused. "That man, Horace Garrett. Is he still here, passed out in the corner?" Marjorie gestured toward a slumped figure at a table in the back. "He will wake up mean in a few hours. They always do. Then I will be ready." Quentin found lodging at the boarding house, a weathered 2-story building run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She charged him 50 cents a night for a room with a bed that sagged in the middle and a window that overlooked the main street. It was not much, but it was clean enough, and more importantly, it gave him a good vantage point to watch the comings and goings in town. He spent the rest of the afternoon writing a letter to his trail boss explaining the delay and arranging for it to be sent south with the next mail rider. Then he cleaned his revolver and checked his ammunition, hoping he would not need either but preparing just in case. He had been in enough frontier towns to know that situations like this rarely resolved themselves peacefully. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains to the west in shades of orange and purple, Quentin positioned himself on the boarding house porch where he had a clear view of both the saloon and the seamstress shop. He rolled a cigarette and smoked it slowly, watching the evening crowd begin to gather. True to Marjorie's prediction, Horace Garrett stumbled out of the saloon around dusk. He was a shorter man, probably in his mid-30s, with thinning hair and the red, veined nose of a habitual drunk. He stood on the boardwalk swaying slightly, and Quentin could see him looking around as if searching for something, or someone. Quentin stood and walked down to street level, keeping his distance but making his presence known. Horace noticed him and squinted in the fading light. "You are the one who helped that bitch this afternoon," Horace slurred. "I helped a woman who was hurt," Quentin corrected. "There is a difference. She is my wife. What I do with her is my business." "Not when you do it in public," Quentin said evenly. "Not when you leave her bleeding in the street." Horace took a stumbling step forward. "You have no right to interfere. She is mine. She ran out on me, stole my money, and I am going to make her pay." "Did she steal from you?" "Damn right she did. Took nearly $50 from my bureau drawer." "Funny," Quentin said, "because from what I heard that money was probably earned by her, not you. A woman has a right to her own wages." "A wife belongs to her husband," Horace spat. "Everything she has is mine. The law says so." "The law says a lot of things," Quentin acknowledged. "But there is also such a thing as what is right, and what you did today was not right." Horace's face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are, preaching at me? You have been in town for 5 minutes and you think you know everything." "That woman is a lying whore who—" "Watch your mouth," Quentin interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. You can say whatever you want about yourself, but you will speak respectfully about her. Or what? Or I will teach you some manners." The two men stared at each other in the gathering darkness. Around them, people on the street had stopped to watch, sensing the possibility of violence. Alamosa did not get much entertainment, and a confrontation between strangers was worth pausing for. Finally, Horace backed down, though his eyes remained hostile. "This is not over. She is my wife, and I am taking her back to Kansas City whether she wants to go or not." "I do not think so," Quentin said. "You cannot stop me. Want to bet?" Horace opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. He turned and stumbled back toward the saloon, muttering under his breath. Quentin watched him go, knowing this was only the beginning. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the way September mornings often did in the high country. Quentin rose early and checked on Victoria, knocking softly on the door to her room. She answered, looking tired but steadier than the previous day. The swelling on her face had gone down some, though the bruises were darker now. "How are you feeling?" Quentin asked. "Like I was kicked by a mule," Victoria said with a wry smile. "But I have had worse. You keep saying that and it keeps making me angry. I did not mean to upset you." "I am not upset with you," Quentin clarified. "I am upset at the situation. At a world where a woman can say she has had worse than being beaten in the street and have it be the truth." Victoria stepped back and gestured for him to come in. Propriety be damned at this point. "You are a strange man, Quentin Ward. Most cowboys I have met are more concerned with cards and whiskey than the injustices of the world." "I like cards and whiskey fine," Quentin said, remaining in the hallway despite the invitation. "But I also think the world could be a better place if more people gave a damn about what happened to their neighbors. Speaking of neighbors, I saw Horace last night from my window. You confronted him." "I did. That was foolish, maybe, but it needed doing." Victoria shook her head, but she was smiling slightly. "You are going to get yourself hurt." "I have been hurt before. I heal." "Quentin, I need you to understand something." Victoria's expression turned serious. "Horace is mean, especially when he drinks. He is not going to give up and go away just because you told him to. He thinks I am his property, and men like him do not let go of their property easily." "Then we will figure something else out," Quentin said. "But you are not going back to Kansas City with him. I will not let that happen. You cannot protect me forever. Eventually you will have to leave, and then where will I be? Maybe I will not leave." The words hung between them, surprising them both. Quentin had not planned to say it, but now that he had, he realized it was true. Something about Victoria called to him in a way he could not quite explain. Maybe it was the strength she showed despite her circumstances. Maybe it was the way she refused to give up even when the whole town had turned against her. Or maybe it was something simpler and more profound, the way his heart had recognized hers at first sight. "You do not mean that," Victoria said softly. "I might. You have a job, a life. You cannot just abandon it for someone you met yesterday." "It was a job, not a life," Quentin said. "And I have been drifting for 10 years now, following cattle drives because I had no particular reason to settle anywhere. Maybe it is time I found a reason." Victoria's eyes glistened. "You barely know me. Then let me get to know you better." Quentin reached out and took her hand, the gesture becoming familiar. "Give me a chance, Victoria. Give us a chance. This is crazy." "Maybe," Quentin agreed, "but sometimes the best things are." Before Victoria could respond, the sound of shattering glass came from downstairs. Both of them rushed to the stairwell to find Mrs. Chen standing in her shop surrounded by broken window glass. A rock lay in the midst of the shards. "What happened?" Victoria asked, hurrying down the stairs. "Someone threw this through my window, Mrs. Chen said, her accented English sharp with anger. She picked up the rock and showed them the paper wrapped around it. In crude handwriting it read, "Send out the whore or there will be more trouble." Victoria's face went pale. "I am so sorry. I will pay for the damage, I promise." "You cannot afford it," Mrs. Chen said bluntly. "You can barely afford rent." "I will cover the cost of the window," Quentin said immediately. Mrs. Chen looked at him, then at Victoria, then at the broken glass. "This is what comes of taking in women with reputations." "She has done nothing wrong," Quentin said firmly. "The only reputation she has is the one this town gave her without cause. Nevertheless, it is my window that is broken." Mrs. Chen set down the rock. "I think perhaps you should find other lodging, Miss Garrett." "Please," Victoria said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I have nowhere else to go. I will work extra hours. I will pay you back. Just please do not throw me out." Mrs. Chen hesitated, and in that hesitation Quentin saw not cruelty but fear. She was an immigrant in a town that barely tolerated her, and she could not afford to be associated with more scandal. "I have an idea," Quentin said. "What if Victoria moved into the boarding house where I am staying? Mrs. Patterson has rooms available, and I will pay her rent until she can get back on her feet. Then there is no trouble for you, Mrs. Chen." "The boarding house will not take her," Mrs. Chen said. "Mrs. Patterson already told half the town she would not house fallen women." "Then I will convince her otherwise," Quentin said. "One way or another, we will figure this out." An hour later, after much negotiation and the promise of an extra month's rent paid up front, Mrs. Patterson grudgingly agreed to rent Victoria a room. It was smaller than the one above the seamstress shop and cost more, but it had a sturdy lock and was on the same floor as Quentin's room, which made him feel better about her safety. As Victoria packed her few belongings, she kept shaking her head. "You are spending too much money on me." "Money you earned through hard work. Money is meant to be spent," Quentin said, "and I cannot think of a better use for it. You are going to regret this. Not possible." They were carrying Victoria's things to the boarding house when they encountered Horace again, this time sober and even more dangerous for it. He stood in the middle of the street, arms crossed, blocking their path. "Going somewhere, Victoria?" he asked. "That is none of your concern," Victoria said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everything about you is my concern. You are my wife." "In name only," Victoria shot back. "I left you, Horace. I am not coming back. You do not get to decide that." "Yes, I do," Victoria said, and there was steel in her voice. "I decide what happens to my life, not you, not anymore." Horace's face darkened. "You think this cowboy is going to save you. He will get tired of you soon enough, just like everyone does. And then where will you be? Alone in a town that hates you, with no money and no prospects. Is that really better than coming home with me?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation, "because anything is better than being with you." The words hit Horace like a slap. His hands clenched into fists, and Quentin stepped between him and Victoria, setting down the carpet bag he was carrying. "Walk away, Horace," Quentin said quietly. "You have already made enough of a scene. This is between me and my wife. Your wife has made her position clear. Time for you to accept it and move on." "I will never move on," Horace hissed. "She is mine, and I am taking her back even if I have to drag her." "You are welcome to try," Quentin said, "but I should warn you I am not as easy to knock down as Victoria." Horace looked between them, weighing his options. Finally, he spat in the dirt at their feet and stormed off. But the look he gave them promised this was far from over. The days that followed fell into a strange but comfortable pattern. Quentin took a job at the livery stable, mucking stalls and tending horses, which gave him a reason to stay in town and earned him enough to cover expenses. Victoria went back to work at the Rusty Bell, despite Quentin's protests, because she refused to be completely dependent on his charity. They saw each other every morning at breakfast in the boarding house dining room, and every evening after Victoria finished work. They talked about everything and nothing: her childhood in Pennsylvania, his years following cattle trails, their dreams for futures that had seemed impossible until recently. Slowly, carefully, they were building something neither of them had expected to find. The attraction between them grew with each passing day. It was in the way Quentin's eyes followed Victoria across a room, in the way Victoria's face lit up when she saw him, in the accidental touches that lingered longer than necessary. But both of them held back, aware of the complications. Victoria was still legally married, and Quentin knew pushing too fast would only give the town more ammunition against her. But Horace was not idle during this time. He spent his days drinking and his nights plotting, and he found willing allies among the men of Alamosa, who resented Quentin's presence and Victoria's defiance. There was a particular group of ranch hands who frequented the Rusty Bell, led by a man named Jake Thornton, who had his own grievances against women who refused to know their place. One evening, about 2 weeks after Quentin's arrival in Alamosa, Victoria was walking back to the boarding house after her shift when 3 men stepped out of an alley. She recognized Jake immediately and felt her heart begin to race. "Evening, Victoria," Jake said, his voice falsely friendly. "Out late, are you not?" "I am just heading home," Victoria said, trying to step around them, but they moved to block her path. "We have been thinking," Jake continued. "You have caused a lot of trouble since you came to town, making decent folk nervous, leading cowboys astray. Maybe it is time you moved on." "I have as much right to be here as anyone," Victoria said, proud that her voice did not shake. "See, that is where you are wrong," Jake said, stepping closer. "Women like you do not have rights. You have what men let you have." "Let me pass," Victoria said firmly. "Or what? You will get your cowboy to save you. He is not here now." But Jake was wrong. Quentin had been walking back from the livery when he saw the men corner Victoria, and he broke into a run. He reached them just as Jake grabbed Victoria's arm. "Let her go," Quentin said, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Jake released Victoria but did not back down. "This is not your fight, cowboy. We are just having a conversation." Looked like more than conversation to me. "Maybe you should mind your own business." "Victoria is my business," Quentin said flatly. The words hung in the air, a declaration that meant more than just this moment. Jake's eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake, Ward. Garrett is her legal husband. You are interfering in a domestic matter." "I am preventing an assault," Quentin corrected. "There is a difference." The standoff lasted several tense moments before Jake finally laughed and stepped back. "This is not over. Garrett has plans for you both. Might want to watch your back." After they left, Victoria sagged against the nearest building, her bravado crumbling. Quentin was there immediately, his arms going around her in a gesture that was pure instinct. She pressed her face against his chest and let herself shake. "I am so tired," she whispered. "Tired of being afraid. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong." "Then do not be," Quentin said softly. "Not right now. Let me be strong for you." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped up in each other in the darkness of the Alamosa night. When Victoria finally pulled back enough to look up at him, the moonlight caught the silver in her eyes. "Quentin," she said, "what are we doing?" "What do you mean, this?" She gestured between them. "Us, I am married. You are going to leave eventually. We are building something that cannot last." "Who says it cannot last?" "Reality. The law, the whole world." Quentin cupped her face gently, careful of her fading bruises. "Victoria, I have not been completely honest with you," her breath caught. "What do you mean?" I told you I was just passing through, that I was following a cattle drive. And that was true at the start. But it has not been true for days now. I am not staying in Alamosa because I am waiting for something. I am staying because of you, Quentin. Let me finish, he said softly. I know we have only known each other for 2 weeks. I know you are technically still married. I know the whole situation is complicated. But Victoria, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. When I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and beautiful, and I do not care what the rest of this town sees. You barely know me, Victoria protested, but her hands had come up to rest on his chest over his heart. I know you wake up early and watch the sunrise when you think no one is looking. I know you save half your meals to eat later because you grew up never quite having enough. I know you have nightmares sometimes, and you try to muffle the sound so you do not wake anyone. I know you love reading but gave away all your books when you left Kansas City because you could not carry them. I know you are scared of thunderstorms, but you stand at the window and watch them anyway because you think lightning is beautiful. How do you know all that? Victoria whispered. Because I pay attention, because you matter to me. Quentin's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Because I am falling in love with you, Victoria Garrett, and I do not know how to stop. I do not want to stop. The tears came then, but they were different from before. Not tears of pain or frustration, but something deeper. I am falling in love with you too, she admitted. I have been trying not to because it seems impossible, but I cannot help it. Then do not help it, Quentin said, and he kissed her. It was gentle and careful, mindful of her healing lip, but it was also full of all the emotion they had been holding back. Victoria's arms went around his neck, and she kissed him back, pouring weeks of loneliness and longing into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. This changes things, Victoria said. Yes, it does. Horace will never grant me a divorce. Then we will find another way. What other way? The law is clear. I am his wife until death do us part. Quentin's jaw set. Then we change what death means. You died when you left Kansas City. Victoria Garrett, the woman married to Horace Garrett, is gone. You are someone new now. That is not how it works. Maybe it should be. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and for the first time since arriving in Alamosa, Victoria felt like she was not facing the world alone. Mrs. Patterson gave them a sharp look when they came in together, but neither of them cared. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The next morning, everything came to a head. Horace had spent the night drinking with Jake Thornton and his friends, working up both his courage and his rage. He showed up at the boarding house just after dawn, pounding on the door and demanding to see his wife. Mrs. Patterson, scandalized and frightened, came to wake both Victoria and Quentin. He is making a scene in the street, says he will not leave until Victoria comes out. Victoria was already dressing, her face pale but determined. I will go talk to him. The hell you will, Quentin said, pulling on his boots. I will handle this. He is my husband. This is my problem. He stopped being just your problem when he threw that rock through the window. When he had his friends threaten you, when he made it clear he was not going to leave peacefully. Quentin stood and strapped on his gun belt, checking his revolver. This ends today. Quentin, please do not do anything foolish. I am going to do what needs to be done, he said, then softened his voice. Trust me, Victoria. I am not going to let him hurt you again. Quentin walked out onto the porch to find Horace standing in the street with Jake and his 2 friends flanking him. A crowd had gathered, because nothing drew people like the promise of violence. Marjorie was there and Mrs. Chen, and half the businesses on the street had emptied their customers onto the boardwalks to watch. There he is, Horace slurred, pointing at Quentin. The man who stole my wife. I did not steal anyone, Quentin said calmly. Victoria made her own choice. She does not get to make choices. She is my wife. She is her own person. You have filled her head with lies, Horace said, and his hand dropped to the gun at his own hip. He was not a fast draw, but he was drunk and angry, and that made him unpredictable. You have turned her against me. She turned against you when you started hitting her, Quentin said, and his voice carried across the silent street. When you drank away every penny she earned. When you made her life a misery. You did that, Horace, not me. That is a lie. Ask her, Quentin challenged. Ask Victoria right now in front of everyone if she wants to go back with you. Victoria had come out onto the porch despite Quentin's wishes. She stood there in the morning light and every eye turned to her. I will never go back with you, Horace, she said clearly. I would rather die. Then maybe that can be arranged, Horace said, and he drew his gun. Everything happened very fast after that. Quentin's hand moved to his own gun, but Jake was faster, pushing Horace's arm so the shot went wide. The bullet splintered the porch railing 2 feet from where Victoria stood. Women in the crowd screamed. Men shouted, and Quentin had his revolver out and pointed at Horace before anyone could move. Drop it, Quentin said, his voice deadly calm. Drop the gun right now, or I swear I will put you down. Horace, shocked into something resembling sobriety by the near miss, let his gun fall to the dirt. Jake and his friends stepped back, hands raised, wanting no part of a shooting. Sheriff is coming, someone called from the crowd. Alamosa's part-time sheriff, a man named Morrison who spent more time farming than enforcing the law, was indeed pushing through the gathered people. What in the hell is going on here? Morrison demanded. That man just tried to shoot me, Victoria said, pointing at Horace. There are witnesses. She is my wife, Horace protested. She ran out on me. I have a right to take her back. You do not have a right to shoot her, Morrison said. He picked up Horace's gun and tucked it into his own belt. Or shoot anyone else for that matter. I could arrest you for attempted murder. Please do, Victoria said, but Morrison shook his head. This is a domestic dispute. The law says a man has authority over his wife. Maybe he went about it wrong, but his grievance is legitimate. Are you serious? Quentin said, his gun still trained on Horace. He tried to kill her. The shot went wide, could have been an accident. It was not an accident, Victoria said. He meant to shoot me. Can you prove that? Morrison asked. The question hung in the air, and Victoria realized with sinking certainty that the law was not going to help her. It never did when it came to matters between husbands and wives. She could have been shot dead in the street, and Horace might have paid a fine at most. This is ridiculous, Marjorie said, pushing forward from the crowd. She was a woman who commanded respect even from men who had none for most females, and Morrison actually looked uncomfortable. I saw the whole thing. Garrett drew first and aimed at his wife. That is attempted murder in anyone's book. Marjorie, stay out of this, Morrison warned. Like hell I will. That girl works for me, and I do not take kindly to people shooting at my employees. She is not your employee. She is his wife. She is both, Marjorie said flatly. And if you will not enforce the law, then maybe the people of this town need to reconsider whether we need a sheriff at all. That got Morrison's attention. His position was elected, and Marjorie had influence. Now wait a minute. No, you wait, Marjorie interrupted. I am tired of watching this town treat Victoria Garrett like dirt when she has done nothing wrong. She works hard, pays her bills, and minds her business. Meanwhile, her worthless husband shows up drunk, causes property damage, threatens people, and now tries to commit murder, and you want to let him walk because of some outdated notion about marital rights. A murmur went through the crowd. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. She is right. I lost a window because of this man's behavior. And he threatened me and my friends, Victoria added, emboldened by the support. There are witnesses to that too. Morrison looked around at the gathered crowd, reading the mood. Not everyone was on Victoria's side, but enough were that he could not ignore it. "Fine," he said. "Horace Garrett, I am holding you for disturbing the peace and reckless discharge of a firearm. You can cool off in a cell for a few days while I figure out what to do with you." "You cannot do this," Horace protested. "I just did. Jake helped me get him to the jail." Jake looked like he wanted to refuse, but with half the town watching, he did not have much choice. He and Morrison hauled Horace away, still protesting, leaving Quentin and Victoria on the porch. The crowd slowly dispersed, most people returning to their businesses with new gossip to share. Marjorie paused on her way back to the saloon. "Girl, you need to leave this town," she said bluntly. "Morrison will keep Garrett locked up for maybe 3 days, and then the law will force him to let him go. When that happens, you need to be long gone." "Where would I go?" Victoria asked. "Anywhere but here." "You have made your stand, and more people support you than you realize, but that does not change what the law says. As long as you are married to Garrett, he has rights over you." Marjorie's expression softened slightly. "For what it is worth, I think you deserve better." "But what I think does not matter to the courts." After Marjorie left, Quentin holstered his gun and turned to Victoria. "She is right, we need to leave." "And go where?" "West," Quentin said immediately, the plan forming as he spoke. "California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere far enough away that Horace cannot find you. Somewhere we can start over." "Quentin, that is crazy." "No crazier than standing here waiting for him to try again." Quentin took her hands. "Victoria, I meant what I said yesterday. I love you. And I am not going to stand by and watch that man hurt you or take you back. If the law will not protect you, then we will protect ourselves. You are talking about running away. I am talking about building a new life. What about your job, your family in Texas?" "My brothers can take care of themselves, and I can find work anywhere. The only thing I cannot replace is you." Quentin's grip tightened. "Come with me, please. Let me take you somewhere safe, somewhere we can be together without fear." Victoria looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He meant every word. This cowboy who had known her for barely 2 weeks was willing to give up everything to keep her safe. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and more than she had ever dared to hope for. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Tonight, as soon as it is dark. We take our things, get horses from the livery, and ride out. By the time Morrison releases Horace, we will be 100 miles away. He will come after us." "Maybe," Quentin acknowledged. "But it is a big country, and I know how to cover our tracks." Victoria thought about the life she had been living in Alamosa. The constant whispers, the suspicious looks, the knowledge that most of the town thought the worst of her. She thought about Horace and his fists, and the legal system that said she belonged to him like a piece of property. And then she thought about Quentin, about the way he said her name, about the future they could have together if they were brave enough to take it. "Okay," she said. "Let us do it. Let us run." They spent the day preparing as subtly as possible. Quentin went to the livery and arranged to borrow 2 horses, leaving money that was probably twice what they were worth with a note saying he would return them to the next town. Victoria packed her few belongings and retrieved the money she had been saving, tucked away in her hidden tin. It was not much, but it was enough to get them started. That evening they ate dinner at the boarding house like nothing was unusual, though Victoria could barely taste her food. Mrs. Patterson seemed suspicious of their good moods, but she said nothing. After dinner, they retired to their separate rooms and waited for the house to settle into sleep. Around midnight, Quentin knocked softly on Victoria's door. She opened it already dressed for travel in her most practical clothes, her carpetbag in hand. They crept down the stairs and out the back door, moving silently through the sleeping town to the livery. The horses were waiting, saddled and ready. Quentin had chosen a steady gelding for Victoria and a larger mount for himself. They led the animals quietly through the back streets until they reached the edge of town, and then they mounted and rode west toward the mountains. The September night was cold and clear, the stars so bright they cast shadows. Victoria had never felt more alive or more terrified. Behind them, Alamosa faded into darkness. Ahead, the future was uncertain. But beside her, Quentin rode steady and sure, and that was enough. They traveled through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the town. As the sun rose over the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the provisions Quentin had packed. "No regrets?" Quentin asked. Victoria looked back the way they had come, then at the vast wilderness stretching before them, and finally at Quentin. "No regrets," she said. "Whatever happens from here, at least I will be free." "We will be free," Quentin corrected, and he kissed her as the new day broke around them. They traveled for weeks, moving through Colorado's high country into Utah, then north through Wyoming. They avoided large towns where questions might be asked, sticking to small settlements where strangers were common, and no one looked too closely at a couple claiming to be married. Quentin used his trail skills to keep them off the main roads, and Victoria learned to ride better than she ever had, her body adapting to the demands of constant travel. At night, they camped under the stars, and Quentin taught Victoria things her Pennsylvania upbringing had never prepared her for. How to build a fire that did not smoke, how to read weather in the clouds, how to move quietly through the wilderness. And in return, Victoria shared pieces of herself she had kept hidden: her love of poetry, her secret dream of owning a bookshop, her belief that the world was bigger and more beautiful than most people imagined. The physical intimacy between them grew naturally during those weeks on the trail. There were no more barriers, no more reasons to hold back. They made love under the vast Wyoming sky, and it was nothing like Victoria's cold, mechanical experiences with Horace. With Quentin, it was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. He treated her like she was precious, like her pleasure mattered as much as his own, and Victoria discovered a part of herself she had thought Horace had destroyed. "I never knew it could be like this," she admitted one night as they lay wrapped in blankets by the fire. "Like what?" Quentin asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Beautiful. I thought it was just something women endured for their husbands, but with you it feels like something we share." Quentin kissed her forehead. "That is how it should be. Love is not about one person taking from another. It is about both people giving freely." "I love you," Victoria said, the words coming easily now. "I know we have not known each other long, but I love you more than I have ever loved anyone." "I love you too," Quentin said. "And one day, when we find a place to settle, I am going to marry you properly. Not because the law says you are mine, but because we choose each other." "I would like that," Victoria whispered. By October, they had reached Montana territory. The land was rugged and beautiful, with mountains that seemed to touch the sky and valleys filled with golden autumn grass. They came to a small town called Silver Creek, not much more than a handful of buildings clustered around a stream rich with trout. The town was young, barely 5 years old, built around a silver mine that had panned out but left behind enough people to form a community. It was the kind of place where people did not ask too many questions because everyone had something to hide. Quentin and Victoria, introducing themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Ward, fit right in. Quentin found work at a ranch outside town, helping with the autumn cattle roundup. The rancher, a grizzled man named Tom Hendricks, took one look at Quentin's rope skills and hired him on the spot. The pay was decent, and included a small cabin on the property. Just one room with a fireplace and a loft, but it was theirs. Victoria found work at the town's general store, run by a kind woman named Sarah Langford who was grateful for the help. Sarah's husband had died in a mining accident, leaving her to run the business alone, and she appreciated Victoria's education and quick mind with figures. For the first time in longer than Victoria could remember, life felt almost normal. She and Quentin fell into a domestic routine that was simple but deeply satisfying. They woke together in their narrow bed and worked during the day, then came home to share meals Quentin cooked over the fireplace. He was surprisingly good in the kitchen, having learned from his mother and years of trail cooking, and Victoria was a terrible cook, which he teased her about gently. The people of Silver Creek accepted them without reservation. To the small community, they were just another couple trying to make a life in the Montana wilderness. No one called Victoria names or looked at her with suspicion. No one questioned Quentin's right to be with her. They were simply Quentin and Victoria Ward, and the freedom of that simple acceptance was intoxicating. "You think Horace is still looking for us?" Victoria asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Probably," Quentin said honestly. "But it has been over a month and we have covered a lot of ground. Even if he tracked us to Colorado's western slope, the trail would have gone cold in Utah. I think we are safe here. I hope you are right. Even if I am not, even if he somehow finds us, it does not matter." Quentin took her hand. "I will protect you, Victoria, always." Winter came early to Montana that year. By November, snow was falling regularly and the mountains became impassable. The ranch work slowed to almost nothing, just feeding cattle and keeping them from freezing, which meant Quentin was home more. He used the time to winterize their cabin, chinked gaps in the walls and built furniture from scrap lumber Tom Hendricks let him have. Victoria thrived in her work at the general store. Sarah came to rely on her more and more, eventually making her a partner in the business. For the first time in her life, Victoria had money of her own that no one could take from her. She saved carefully, dreaming of the day when she and Quentin might have enough to buy a small piece of land and build a real home. Christmas came, and the town celebrated together in the small church building that also served as a meeting hall. Victoria had not been to church since leaving Kansas City, afraid of judgment, but Silver Creek's congregation was different. They welcomed everyone, and the sermon was about redemption and second chances. Victoria cried during the hymns, and Quentin held her hand through the whole service. On Christmas night, back in their cabin with a fire crackling and snow falling softly outside, Quentin gave Victoria a present. It was a book, a collection of poems by Walt Whitman, and inside the cover he had written, "To Victoria, who taught me what love really means. Forever yours, Quentin." "How did you know I love Whitman?" Victoria asked, clutching the book to her chest. "You quoted Song of Myself once when you thought I was not listening. I remembered." Quentin looked almost shy. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have something beautiful." "It is perfect," Victoria said, and she kissed him with all the love and gratitude she felt. They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, and afterward, Victoria read Whitman aloud by firelight while Quentin held her close. "I have never been this happy," Victoria admitted. "Even before Horace, even when my parents were alive, I never felt this content." "Good," Quentin said. "You deserve happiness. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." "I have everything I need right here," Victoria said, and she meant it. The winter passed peacefully. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but neither of them minded. It was a cocoon of sorts, a protected space where the outside world could not reach them. Quentin taught Victoria to play poker using dried beans for chips. Victoria taught Quentin to read better, his schooling having been interrupted by ranch work in his youth. They talked about their dreams for the future, about the family they might have someday, about growing old together. In February, Victoria realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was stress or the change in climate, but when another month passed, she knew. She was pregnant with Quentin's child. She told him on a clear evening when the first hints of spring were starting to show in the lengthening days. "Quentin, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the saddle he was mending, his expression curious. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby." Quentin went very still. Then his face broke into the widest smile Victoria had ever seen. "Truly, truly." He crossed the cabin in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating like he could not quite believe it. "We are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Victoria asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Quentin said. He set her down carefully as if she might break. "A baby, our baby. Victoria, I promise I will be the best father I can be. I will protect you both, provide for you, love you with everything I have." "I know you will," Victoria said. "I have never doubted that for a moment." The pregnancy changed things in subtle ways. Quentin became even more protective, insisting Victoria rest more and work less. Sarah, when she learned the news, was delighted and immediately began adjusting Victoria's schedule to accommodate her condition. The town seemed to share in their joy, women offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, men slapping Quentin on the back and offering congratulations. But beneath the happiness, Victoria carried a persistent worry. She was still, legally, Horace's wife, and that meant her child born within a marriage would be considered Horace's property under the law. It did not matter that Quentin was the father, that Horace had no idea the child existed. If he ever found them, he could claim the baby as his own. Victoria did not share these fears with Quentin at first, not wanting to dampen his happiness. But as her belly swelled with life and the reality of their situation became harder to ignore, she finally voiced her concerns one evening in early summer. "What if Horace finds us?" she asked. "What if he takes the baby?" Quentin's face hardened. "He will not. I will not let him." "The law says—" "I do not care what the law says," Quentin interrupted. "That is our child, mine and yours. Horace has no claim to it, legal or otherwise, and if he tries to take our baby, I will kill him myself." The words were stark and meant absolutely. Victoria believed he meant them, but she also knew it might not be enough. "Maybe we should move again. Go further west to California or Oregon. Change our names completely." "If that is what you want, we will do it," Quentin said. "But Victoria, we cannot run forever. At some point, we have to stand our ground and fight for the life we want." "How do we fight the law?" "I do not know yet," Quentin admitted, "but I will figure it out, I promise." Their son was born in September of 1879, almost exactly a year after Quentin had first ridden into Alamosa. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Sarah Langford and the town's midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Tucker. Quentin paced outside the cabin for hours, nearly driving himself crazy with worry, until Sarah finally called him in to meet his son. The baby was red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. Quentin held him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and Victoria watched the man she loved become a father. "He is beautiful," Quentin whispered. "Absolutely beautiful." They named him Daniel Thomas Ward, after Quentin's father and the rancher who had given them a chance. Baby Daniel had his father's green eyes and a shock of dark hair like his mother, and from the moment he was born, He was loved more fiercely than any child had ever been. The first few months of Daniel's life were exhausting but wonderful. Quentin doted on his son, getting up in the night to walk him when he cried, singing him old trail songs to help him sleep. Victoria recovered slowly from the birth, but the joy of watching Quentin with Daniel made every difficult moment worthwhile. Silver Creek embraced the little family. Sarah closed the store for a week so Victoria could recover, and townspeople brought food and gifts until the cabin was overflowing. Tom Hendricks gave Quentin a raise and told him the cabin was his for as long as he wanted it. They had built a community, a place where they belonged, but their peace was not to last. In December, a stranger rode into Silver Creek asking questions. He was a bounty hunter of sorts, a man who tracked debtors and runaways for pay. His name was Carson, and he had been hired by Horace Garrett to find his runaway wife. Sarah heard the man asking around and immediately sent word to Quentin at the ranch. Someone is looking for a woman matching Victoria's description. Says her husband hired him to bring her back. Quentin felt his blood run cold. They had been safe for more than a year, long enough that he had let himself believe Horace had given up. But clearly the man's obsession ran deeper than anyone had realized. "What do we do?" Victoria asked when Quentin told her. She was holding Daniel, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger closing in. "First, we do not panic," Quentin said, though his own heart was racing. "This Carson does not know for sure you are here. He is fishing, asking questions. If we are smart, we can send him on a wild goose chase. And if we cannot, then we fight," Quentin said simply. "Or we run, but either way I will not let him take you." The next day, Quentin went into town and found Carson in the saloon. He was a hard-looking man in his 40s with cold eyes and a gun that looked well used. Quentin approached him carefully, playing the part of a curious local. "Heard you are looking for someone," Quentin said casually. Carson looked him over. "Maybe. You know a woman named Victoria Garrett, dark hair, brown eyes, late 20s, might be going by a different name." "Lots of women match that description," Quentin said. "This is Montana. People come here to start over. What do you want with her?" "Her husband wants her back. She ran out on him, stole his property. He is offering a reward for information leading to her return." "How much of a reward?" Quentin asked, hoping he sounded greedy rather than concerned. $50. It was a significant sum, enough to tempt someone who needed money. Quentin pretended to consider. "When did she run off?" "About a year and a half ago. Trail went cold in Utah, but I have been working my way through Montana settlements. She has to be somewhere." "Might try the mining camps," Quentin suggested. "Lots of women working there and no one asks questions. If she wanted to hide, that would be the place." Carson looked interested. "Any camps you would recommend? Virginia City is the biggest." "If she is in Montana, that would be where I would start." It was a gamble. Virginia City was 2 days' ride south, far enough to buy them time but close enough that Carson might actually check it out. Quentin could only hope the lie was convincing enough. Carson bought him a drink and asked a few more questions, which Quentin answered vaguely, always redirecting toward Virginia City or other places far from Silver Creek. Finally, Carson seemed satisfied. "Appreciate the help," he said. "If your information pans out, I might have to split that reward with you." "Always happy to help a man find his wife," Quentin said, hating every word. After Carson left town the next morning, heading south toward Virginia City, Quentin and Victoria had a long discussion about their options. "He will be back," Victoria said. "When he does not find me in Virginia City, he will widen his search. Eventually, someone will tell him about us." "Then maybe it is time to disappear again," Quentin said reluctantly. "We can go to Oregon, change our names completely. Start fresh where no one knows us." I am tired of running, Victoria said. This is our home. Daniel was born here. Our friends are here. Why should we have to leave because Horace cannot let go? Because the alternative is risking him taking you back. What if there was another way? Victoria asked slowly. What if we could make it so Horace legally had no claim on me? How? You are married to him. But what if I was not? Victoria's eyes were bright with possibility. What if Victoria Garrett died? Quentin stared at her. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting we stage my death. If Horace believes I am dead, he will stop looking. The bounty hunter will stop searching, and we can live our lives in peace. That is insane. Is it? People die all the time on the frontier. A wagon accident, a fall, an illness. If word got back to Horace that his wife perished somewhere between Colorado and Montana, he would have no reason to keep searching. Quentin thought about it, seeing the logic even as he hated the idea. How would we even do it? Over the next few weeks, they formulated a plan. It was risky and required help from people they trusted, but it was the only solution they could think of that did not involve running forever or killing Horace, which would make Quentin a murderer. They brought Sarah and Tom Hendricks into their confidence, explaining the whole situation. Both of them were initially skeptical but ultimately agreed to help. You two deserve to live without fear, Sarah said firmly. If this is what it takes, then we will do it. The plan was simple in theory but complex in execution. They would spread word that Victoria had taken ill with pneumonia, a common and deadly ailment. Quentin would take her to seek treatment in a larger town, and on the way, she would supposedly die. They would bury someone in a marked grave with Victoria's name on it, and the local minister would record the death in his register. Word would spread, as it always did on the frontier, and eventually reach Horace's ears. The someone they would bury would be a collection of stones wrapped in blankets, weighted to feel like a body. It was morbid but necessary, and Victoria would return to Silver Creek as someone new. They waited until Carson returned to Silver Creek in late January, having found nothing in Virginia City. This time, several townspeople corroborated the story. Victoria Ward had fallen ill just after Christmas. Her husband had taken her to Helena for proper medical care, but tragically, she had died on the journey. She was buried in a small cemetery outside of town, and her grieving husband had returned to collect their infant son. Carson went to see the grave himself, a simple wooden cross bearing the name Victoria Ward, beloved wife and mother, died January 1880. He spoke to the minister, who showed him the death record. He asked questions at the general store, where Sarah tearfully recounted Victoria's illness and Quentin's devastation. Finally, apparently satisfied, Carson left Silver Creek and headed back east. A month later, they received word through the informal frontier communication network that Horace Garrett had been told of his wife's death. According to reports, he had received the news with little emotion, simply nodding and ordering another drink. He did not even care, Victoria said when she heard. I ran from him, lived in fear of him, and in the end he did not even care that I died. Good, Quentin said fiercely. It means you are finally free. Victoria Garrett is dead and you never have to be her again. But of course, legally, Victoria still was Victoria Garrett. They had faked her death but not actually dissolved the marriage, which meant she and Quentin were not legally married, and Daniel was technically illegitimate in the eyes of the law. Does it matter? Quentin asked when Victoria voiced these concerns. We know the truth. We are a family. Some piece of paper does not change that. I want us to be married, Victoria said. Really married, not living a lie. Then we will figure out how to make that happen, Quentin promised. But for now, just be happy that Horace is out of our lives forever. They were careful for the next few months, maintaining the fiction that Victoria Ward had died. Quentin told people he was considering moving away, that Silver Creek held too many painful memories. Then, in the spring of 1880, a new woman arrived in town. Her name was Victoria Ward, niece of the deceased woman of the same name, come to help her grieving uncle care for his infant son. She bore a striking resemblance to her late aunt, people noted, but that was not uncommon in families. And it was so kind of her to take on the burden of caring for her cousin Daniel. The fiction was thin, but it worked. The people of Silver Creek who knew the truth kept it to themselves, and newcomers to town had no reason to question the story. Gradually, Quentin and Victoria rebuilt their lives around this new identity. They married in a quiet ceremony 2 years later, after Quentin filed for a marriage license, using Victoria's new identity. It was not entirely legal, since Victoria Garrett technically still existed somewhere in the records, but it was as close to legitimate as they could manage. The ceremony was small, just Sarah and Tom and a few close friends, but it was deeply meaningful. "I, Quentin Ward, take you, Victoria, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Quentin said, and the words carried the weight of everything they had been through. "I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by you for as long as we both shall live." "I, Victoria, take you, Quentin, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I promise to love you, trust you, and build a life with you for as long as we both shall live." When they kissed, it felt like a beginning and an ending both. The past was finally behind them. The future stretched out bright and full of possibility. Daniel grew into a healthy, happy boy with his father's love of horses and his mother's quick mind. In 1882, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after the woman who had helped save them. 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they called Thomas. Quentin bought land from Tom Hendricks and built a proper house, a sturdy 2-story structure with windows that caught the morning light. Victoria realized her dream of opening a bookshop, though in Silver Creek it was more of a lending library out of a room in the general store. She taught reading to the town's children and adults alike, sharing her love of literature with anyone who wanted to learn. The years passed peacefully. Silver Creek grew and prospered, and the Ward family grew with it. They became pillars of the community, respected and loved. No one ever questioned Victoria's past or Quentin's sudden decision to settle down. They were just Quentin and Victoria Ward, a couple who had built something beautiful out of very little. There were challenges, of course. Harsh winters and crop failures, illnesses and injuries, the everyday struggles of frontier life. But they faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. Quentin never raised his hand to Victoria, never spoke to her with anything but respect and affection. And Victoria, who had once thought she would never trust a man again, trusted Quentin with her whole heart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch of their house watching their children play in the yard. Daniel was 12 now, already taking on responsibilities at the ranch. Sarah was 8, smart as a whip, and determined to read every book in her mother's library. Thomas was 6, following his older siblings around with boundless energy. "You ever regret it?" Victoria asked, leaning against Quentin's shoulder. "Running away with me, giving up your old life?" "Not for a single second," Quentin said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria. You and our children, this life we have built together. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the scary parts, especially the scary parts, they led me to you." Victoria turned to look at him, this man who had risked everything for her. His face was more weathered now, lines around his eyes from years of sun and smiling, streaks of gray in his hair. But he was still the same cowboy who had knelt beside her in the dirt in Alamosa and asked her name with such gentle respect that it had broken her heart open. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I can ever express." "I know," Quentin said, pulling her close. "And I love you just as much." "Maybe more." "Impossible," Victoria teased. "I loved you first, did not. I loved you the moment I saw you, did not. I loved you when you used my name." They were still arguing playfully when Daniel called out that dinner was ready. They went inside together, Quentin's arm around Victoria's shoulders, surrounded by the noise and chaos of their children, their home, their life. That night, after the children were asleep, Quentin and Victoria sat by the fireplace. "You think Horace is still alive?" Victoria asked. It was a question she had not voiced in years. "Does it matter?" Quentin asked. "I suppose not. Even if he is, Victoria Garrett is dead. I am someone new now." "You have always been someone new," Quentin said. "From the moment you left Kansas City, you were becoming the person you were meant to be. Alamosa tried to tell you who you were, called you every name but your own. But I used your name softly, and you finally cried, and that was when you started to heal." Victoria reached for his hand. "You saved me, Quentin." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just helped you see that you were worth saving." They sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the house settling around them. Outside, Montana stretched vast and beautiful under a sky filled with stars. Inside, everything they had fought for and built together was warm and real and theirs. The past could not touch them anymore. The future was whatever they chose to make it, and the present was perfect just as it was. Years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm that Victoria had never imagined possible in those dark days in Alamosa. The Ward family became synonymous with Silver Creek's growth and prosperity. Quentin's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew, and Tom Hendricks eventually made him a full partner in the ranch operations. The land prospered under their joint management, and Quentin took pride in building something lasting for his children. Victoria's lending library expanded until it truly became a bookshop, taking over the entire second floor of the general store building. She ordered books from as far away as New York and San Francisco, and people came from neighboring towns to browse her collection. She started a weekly reading group for women, a space where they could discuss literature and ideas without judgment. It became something of a haven, a place where women could speak their minds freely. Daniel grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's practical skills with his mother's love of learning. At 16, he was already helping run the ranch and talking about studying veterinary medicine someday. Sarah inherited her mother's passion for books and her father's determination, announcing at age 12 that she intended to become a teacher. Thomas was the adventurous one, always exploring the mountains and bringing home stories of wildlife and wild places. In 1888, 8 years after they had staged Victoria's death, news reached Silver Creek that caught them both off guard. A letter arrived addressed to Quentin Ward from a lawyer in Kansas City. Inside was a notice that Horace Garrett had died of liver failure, brought on by years of heavy drinking. As his last known associates, they were being contacted to see if anyone knew of his widow's whereabouts. Victoria held the letter with shaking hands. "He is dead, really dead." "Good riddance," Quentin said without apology. "The world is better off without him." "I know I should not feel this way, but all I feel is relief," Victoria admitted. "No more looking over my shoulder, no more worry that he might somehow find out the truth." "You have every right to feel relief," Quentin said. "That man made your life hell. His death does not deserve your grief." The lawyer's letter also mentioned that Horace had died intestate, with no known heirs. His few possessions had been sold to pay his debts. There was nothing for Victoria to claim, even if she had wanted to, which she did not. The past was truly buried now. Does this mean we could get remarried? Victoria asked. Legally this time, I mean. I am a widow now, officially. Victoria Garrett's husband is dead. But Victoria Garrett is also dead, according to all official records, Quentin pointed out. And you are Victoria Ward now. We are already married, as far as anyone knows. I know, but I thought maybe. Victoria trailed off, not quite sure what she was hoping for. Quentin pulled her into his arms. Victoria, I do not need a piece of paper from some government office to know you are my wife. We said our vows to each other and to God. We have built a life together, raised children together, loved each other for over a decade. That is more real than any legal document. You are right, Victoria said, relaxing into his embrace. I just want everything to be perfect. It is perfect, Quentin said. Maybe not in the legal sense, but in every way that matters. They burned the lawyer's letter in the fireplace that night, watching the paper curl and blacken until it was ash. With it, the last connection to Victoria's old life went up in smoke. She was free, finally and completely, to be exactly who she had become. The years that followed were perhaps the happiest of Victoria's life. She watched her children grow into adults with pride and joy. Daniel did indeed study veterinary medicine, heading to Denver for training and returning to Silver Creek to set up a practice. Sarah became a teacher, opening a proper school in Silver Creek with her mother's full support. Thomas explored the West, working as a surveyor and sending letters home filled with descriptions of the places he saw. Quentin and Victoria grew older together gracefully. Silver streaks became more prominent in both their hair. Quentin's hands grew rough with decades of ranch work, but they were always gentle when they touched Victoria. She developed fine lines around her eyes from years of reading and smiling, but to Quentin, she was more beautiful at 45 than she had been at 27. They celebrated 20 years together in 1898, though officially they had only been married 16. The whole town turned out for a party at the ranch, and their children and grandchildren. Daniel had married and given them 2 grandchildren, by then surrounded them with love. 20 years ago, I rode into a dusty Colorado town with no intention of staying, Quentin said in his speech that night. But I saw a woman who needed help, and something in me could not ride away. Best decision I ever made was stopping to ask her name. Best decision I ever made was taking his hand when he offered it, Victoria added. He showed me that kindness exists in this world, that not all men are cruel. He taught me to trust again, to love again, to believe in happy endings. To Victoria, someone called out, raising a glass. The heart of Silver Creek. To Quentin, another voice added. The man who saw worth where others saw waste. To them both, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air, who taught us all what real love looks like. The party lasted until dawn, filled with music and dancing and storytelling. Quentin and Victoria danced together under the stars, moving to old songs they had hummed while traveling through Wyoming 20 years before. Their children watched with knowing smiles, understanding that what their parents had was rare and precious. As the sun rose over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and pink, Quentin and Victoria stood alone on their porch. Everyone else had gone home or fallen asleep inside, but they were not ready for the night to end. You remember that first sunrise? Victoria asked. When we stopped running and watched the dawn break. I remember everything about those early days, Quentin said. The fear, the hope, the feeling that we were building something impossible. It did not turn out to be impossible after all. No, it did not. We made it real through sheer stubborn determination. Victoria laughed softly. We were foolish, we were brave, we were lucky. We were loved, Quentin corrected, by each other, which is the greatest luck of all. They stood together watching the new day arrive, their hands intertwined the way they had been for 2 decades. The town they had helped build was waking up around them. Smoke began to rise from chimneys. Roosters crowed. Life continued its eternal rhythm. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For using my name softly when the town had called me everything else. For making me cry when I thought I had no tears left. For being the man who saw me as a person when everyone else saw me as a problem." "Thank you for letting me," Quentin said. "For trusting me enough to take my hand. For running away with me into the unknown. For building this beautiful life we share." They went inside as the sun fully crested the mountains, ready to face whatever came next. They had survived hardship and danger, persecution and fear. They had built a family, a home, a legacy that would outlive them both. In the end, it was not about the town that had called her every name but her own. It was about the cowboy who used her name softly, with respect and love, and helped her find the tears she had been holding back. Those tears had been the beginning of healing, the start of transformation. From the woman bleeding in the dirt in Alamosa to the respected businesswoman and mother in Silver Creek, Victoria had traveled a remarkable journey. And Quentin had been beside her every step of the way, not as her savior but as her partner, her equal, her love. As they grew older still, they spoke often of those early days. Quentin never tired of telling the story of how they met, always emphasizing the moment he asked her name and saw the surprise in her eyes. Victoria loved to recount their escape from Colorado, the weeks on the trail when they fell in love under vast western skies. These stories became family legend, passed down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In 1910, as they approached their 70s, they finally made one last trip together. They traveled south through Wyoming, retracing the route they had taken 32 years earlier when they were running from Horace. The West had changed dramatically in those decades. Railroads crisscrossed the land. Telegraph wires connected distant places. The wild frontier was becoming civilized, but some things remained the same. The mountains still stood eternal. The sky was still vast and full of stars. And the love between them was still as strong as it had been when they were young and desperate and full of hope. They stopped at places they remembered: a stream where they had caught fish for dinner, a meadow where they had spent the night under the stars, a small settlement that was now a thriving town. Everything was familiar and foreign at once, changed by time but still recognizable. "I would not change anything," Victoria said as they sat by a campfire one night, bundled in blankets against the autumn chill. "Every hardship, every moment of fear, every difficult choice, they all led us here." "To Montana?" Quentin asked with a smile. "To happiness," Victoria corrected. "To a life worth living." On the way back to Montana, they made one final detour. They went to Alamosa, Colorado, the town where their story began. It had grown in the decades since they left, new buildings lining streets that had once been mostly dirt and boardwalks. The Rusty Bell Saloon was still there, though under new ownership. The seamstress shop was gone, replaced by a dress store. They did not announce who they were. They were just 2 elderly travelers passing through, and no one gave them a second glance. Victoria walked past the spot where she had lain bleeding in the dirt, where Quentin had stopped his horse and dismounted to help a stranger. So much had come from that simple act of kindness. "I wonder what happened to Marjorie," Victoria mused as they prepared to leave town. "Probably retired rich and ornery," Quentin said. "She was the type to survive and prosper." As they rode out of Alamosa, Victoria looked back one last time at the town that had called her every name but her own. She felt no anger, no bitterness, only a distant gratitude. Those people, with their cruelty and judgment, had pushed her into Quentin's path. Without them, she might never have known what real love felt like. They returned to Silver Creek and their family, content that they had closed that final circle. The past was acknowledged and put to rest. Only the present and future mattered now. Quentin Ward died peacefully in his sleep in 1916 at the age of 68. Victoria was beside him, holding his hand when he took his last breath. His final words were her name, spoken softly the way he always had, with infinite tenderness and respect. She wept finally, the tears flowing freely for the man who had given her everything. Victoria lived 7 more years, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She continued to run her bookshop until the very end, sharing her love of literature with new generations. She spoke often of Quentin, keeping his memory alive through stories that made her family laugh and cry. On her deathbed in 1923, her children gathered around her. "Tell us again how you and Papa met," Sarah asked, even though she knew the story by heart. Victoria smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "I was bleeding in the dirt and the whole town had called me terrible things, but your father rode up, dismounted, and asked me my name. Just my name, like it mattered, like I mattered. And when he said it, Victoria, so softly and kindly, I finally cried. Those were the first tears I had shed in months, and they were the beginning of everything good in my life." "He loved you so much," Daniel said, tears in his eyes. "And I loved him," Victoria said. "From that very first moment, though I did not realize it then. He saved me by seeing me as a person when no one else would. But more than that, he loved me as an equal. He never tried to own me or control me. He just loved me purely and completely for exactly who I was." "That is how we all should love," Sarah said. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "That is how we all should love." She died that night peacefully with a smile on her face. The whole town mourned her passing. They buried her next to Quentin on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, beneath a Montana sky so vast and beautiful it seemed to hold infinite possibility. The stone they placed over their graves was simple but eloquent. It read, "Quentin and Victoria Ward." He saw her worth when others did not. She trusted him when trust seemed impossible. Together they built a love that outlasted every hardship, united forever. Their story lived on in Silver Creek and beyond. The bookshop Victoria founded still stood, now run by one of her granddaughters. The ranch Quentin helped build still prospered under the management of his descendants. And their love story was told and retold, a testament to the power of kindness, respect, and choosing to see the humanity in others. In the end, it was a simple story. A cowboy stopped to help a woman in need. He used her name softly when others had been cruel. She finally cried, releasing years of pain. And from that moment of connection, built on respect and compassion, grew a love that changed both their lives completely. It was the kind of love that proved happy endings were possible, even in the harsh reality of the Wild West. The kind of love that showed how one person's kindness could save another person's life. The kind of love that built families and communities and legacies that lasted long after the lovers themselves were gone. The town had called her every name but her own. But a cowboy used it softly, and she finally cried. And in those tears was the seed of healing, of hope, of a future neither of them could have imagined. That was how the story began, and how, in the hearts of those who remembered them, it would never truly end.